you want to die today? That question is burned into the mind of Jessica Buchanan after it was asked of her again and again during the more than 90 days of being held in captivity by Somali pirates. A teacher by trade, Buchanan had been working for a non-governmental organization or NGO in war-torn Somalia when she was snatched off the streets. What followed were 3 months of abject terror as she, along with other captives, was threatened with death daily as Somali pirates tried to use her to extract a ransom. That ransom would never be paid. Instead, the United States tasked SEAL Team 6 with infiltrating the Somali compound, taking out anybody who stood in their way, and getting Buchanan out alive. In this video, we share the story of how this incredible team of Special Forces operatives did the impossible to rescue Jessica Buchanan while sending a clear message to the Somali pirates: the US does not negotiate. Our story starts in October 2011. Buchanan, a rural Ohio native who was 32 at the time, was living and working in the Somaliland capital of Hargeisa, along with her Swedish husband Eric Landemal. The two had chosen to dedicate their lives to NGOs in the hope that they could provide some relief to the embattled citizens of a nation being torn apart by civil war. Buchanan worked as a regional educational advisor during this time, with her main job being to take on the terrible task of producing educational materials for children that showed them how to avoid landmines and other types of war munitions. Though horrifying in concept, the work was fulfilling, but it also took Buchanan to some of the most dangerous places in Somaliland. That was the case on the day of her kidnapping, as she found herself 480 miles away from her Hargeisa home, attending a staff training program in South Somalia. The field offices where she would be stationed were built in one of the country's least stable regions, surrounded by warring clans and Islamist militant group Al-Shabaab, and just a third of a mile away, a known Somali pirate den. Buchanan knew she was stepping into danger. On the day of her trip, she even made a joke to her husband that would serve as a chilling prophecy of what was to come. "If I get kidnapped on this trip, will you come and get me?" But she also thought pirates wouldn't be a threat. She, along with most others at the time, thought that the Somalian pirates kept most of their activities in the water. They'd sail out, capture and ransack boats, and use anybody they captured to extract ransoms. If the pirates had continued this routine, Buchanan might have reached her training destination. But the pirate routine had changed. They were increasingly attacking targets on land. Sadly for Buchanan, her convoy would be next in the firing line. On the day of the training session, Buchanan found herself traveling in a land cruiser alongside a 60-year-old colleague named Paul Hogan Thisted. The two were chatting as their vehicle headed towards South Somalia, where they heard another vehicle thundering up from behind. Within seconds, that vehicle had roared alongside their land cruiser, splattering mud all over the windows before pulling in front to force them to a halt. From there, the situation was a blur. Buchanan remembers armed men jumping out of the attacking car and into her vehicle. One of the Somali pirates took up a position behind Buchanan, pointing an AK-47 at her head, as another told the driver to go. Another man sitting behind her started to rifle through her bag and wallet, pulling items out, examining them, and then discarding what he didn't want. "You know circus music," she said later. "I could almost hear that while I was watching him. He was high on cat, which is a flowering plant that acts as a stimulant when chewed, and he had the rolling eyes, the stained teeth, and he was mumbling and laughing, giddy, erratic." Whatever twisted humor may have been derived from the moment soon gave way to terror. Buchanan started to fear for her life, believing that her captors intended to assault her before killing and dumping her body. "This can't be the end. This can't be the end of my life. I'm only 32 years old. I haven't had any children yet," she thought as the driver rode on like a madman. Hours of driving followed. At several points, the pirates stopped the land cruiser. Sometimes they did so simply to swap drivers. At other times, they pulled the hostages out to change vehicles, perhaps attempting to evade any authorities that may have been on the lookout for the land cruiser. Each time new men entered the car, Buchanan noticed that they had AK-47s slung over their shoulders, along with ammunition and grenades. In the dead of night, the pirates finally stopped the vehicle deep within a patch of scrub desert. Exhausted and terrified, both Buchanan and Thisted were marched out of the car and ordered to walk. At the time, Buchanan believed she was being marched to her death, claiming that she wanted her last moments to be dignified rather than desperate. Her thoughts turned to her mother, who had passed the year prior, with Buchanan saying that she could feel her close as she was pushed to walk deeper into the desert. Then came the order: stop and kneel. On her knees with her back to the men, Buchanan thought that her time had come, but rather than a bullet, she received another command: sleep. Buchanan was pushed to the ground and almost immediately passed out, her body giving way to exhaustion. When she awoke a couple of hours later, she finally understood the reality of her situation. She had been kidnapped and was going to be used for ransom. She received confirmation when she asked one of the pirates if they were going to kill her. "No, money. We just want money." For the next 5 days, Buchanan and Thisted were kept in the desert. They weren't allowed to communicate, though they snatched the odd moment to formulate a strategy. They would wait and watch, gathering any information they could about their situation. Buchanan came up with the idea of requesting a phone call. She knew the request would be denied, but simply making it would allow her to figure out the pirates' chain of command. She also took stock of the number of people in the location. All told, there were 26 pirates, many of them children or teenagers, who worked in shifts to guard their new captives. After 5 days, the pirates finally arranged a proof-of-life call with Buchanan's NGO. It was in that call that they made their ransom demand, $45 million for their 2 captives. "I'm not a ship," Buchanan thought as her heart sank in her chest. There was no way pirates would receive that much money for the lives of 2 people. Sure enough, the demand wasn't met. Those initial few days turned into weeks, followed by months of captivity. The pirates kept their captives on the move, regularly stuffing them into cars and driving them to different parts of the desert. Once at a new location, Buchanan and Thisted would be forced to sleep on the ground, often in the open air. The days were sweltering hot, but the nights were cold. Buchanan kept her wits about her and continued to observe her surroundings. The pirates asked about her family, with her answers including a made-up son to whom she gave the same name as her dog. That was a clever tactical move. Buchanan knew that mothers are revered in Somali culture, meaning her captors would be less likely to kill her if they believed she had a child. This continued for months. By January 2012, Buchanan was in a rough condition. She had managed to dissuade her captors from violating her body by talking about how she was a mother and a wife. But she could do nothing to prevent nature from hurting her. A lack of sanitation combined with limited and often dirty water led to her developing a urinary tract infection, or UTI. That infection spread to her kidneys. Worse yet, negotiations seemed to have stalled. By this point, the pirates were regularly threatening to sell her to the Al-Shabaab terrorist group, estimating they could get about $5 million for her. She started to cling to her only possible reprieve, a video. About 3 weeks into her captivity, Buchanan had been ordered to film a video alongside Thisted. Looking gaunt and terrified, she has at least provided proof that she was alive. Perhaps that video would prompt the US government into action. But no response had come. Why would it? She was just an aid worker. What Buchanan didn't know is that the United States had been preparing to launch a rescue for weeks, with the operation being scheduled for the end of January. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, or FBI, was heavily involved in the early intelligence gathering required to launch this dramatic rescue operation. Using drones and an array of contacts within Somalia, along with cell phone tapping and similar surveillance tricks, the FBI had been tracking the pirates' movements almost from the moment they'd taken Buchanan and Thisted. They knew where the pair were. The only reason they hadn't acted sooner was because they believed Buchanan's life wasn't in imminent danger. That all changed when the FBI learned of Buchanan's UTI. Buchanan's captors allowed her to speak to hostage negotiators stationed in Nairobi in late January. By this point, she'd become so ill that she could barely stand, with her infection causing her relentless pain. She told the negotiator that she believed she had a kidney infection before breaking down into tears and uttering, I'm afraid I'm going to die." The FBI was tracking that call. An entire chain of events was kicked off with the news of Buchanan's condition reaching the White House. President Barack Obama learned that the hostage's weakened state presented a massive problem. Buchanan's life was now in imminent danger, and the only conclusion possible was reached. She needed to be extracted or she would die a horrible death in the Somali desert. She had less than 2 weeks before the UTI killed her. Obama gave the order, "Get Buchanan out." That order was delivered to SEAL Team 6, the very same group that had conducted the successful raid that resulted in the death of Osama bin Laden less than a year prior. For the next few days, SEAL Team 6's Blue Squadron practiced hostage extraction techniques. They also started planning. January 25th was chosen as the extraction date. That night would see no moon in the sky, giving the SEALs the invaluable cover of darkness as they conducted their operation. The plan involved 24 members of Blue Squadron, who would all parachute into Somalia via a C-130 Hercules. Blue Squadron would parachute into Somalia several miles away from the Somali pirate camp, giving the team time to reunite following the drop before it approached the camp on foot. Stealth was of the essence. The operation had to be quick, quiet, and surprising. Around 500 miles away from the pirate camp, a US operations base in Djibouti, which is just north of Somalia, was gathering information. The US also dedicated well over $100 million to the operation. Some may see this number in comparison to the $45 million the pirates had demanded and wonder why the US was willing to spend double the ransom to extract Buchanan. The answer is simple. This was about sending a message to future hostage takers. Ransoms wouldn't be paid. Instead, death and destruction awaited those who tried to steal US citizens. With preparations completed, SEAL Team 6's Blue Squadron boarded a C-130 Hercules stationed in Mogadishu, Somalia's capital and most prosperous city. There, they waited until Obama gave the green light to go. The Hercules took to the skies, flown by pilots who themselves had only just arrived in Mogadishu on the back of a 9-hour flight with no break in between. Back in the White House, Obama sat in front of a monitor. SEAL Team 6 was transmitting a live feed of the hostage rescue directly to the Oval Office. Obama could see everything, with the footage also likely being recorded for later debriefing and examination. Unbeknownst to SEAL Team 6, the operation had already benefited from an early stroke of good fortune. The pirates had planned to move their camp on January 25th, but the location change was cancelled at the last minute due to an outbreak of food poisoning caused by the pirates eating spoiled meat the day before. That may also explain why there were only 9 of the 26 pirates Buchanan had counted on guard duty. Unfortunately, that stroke of luck was accompanied by an element of misfortune, a solar storm. That storm was so violent that it disrupted the Earth's magnetic field, making it incredibly difficult for SEAL Team 6 to use radio communication to speak to their support units. To add to the squadron's problems, the storm had whipped up a frenzied wind blowing at twice the speed the team had anticipated. For a normal operation, this would have been grounds to cancel and try again another day. That wasn't an option here. Buchanan was quickly running out of time, and it would be close to a month before the team could try again. Each of the 24 men on board the Hercules transport made the conscious decision to accept the added risk during the 3-hour flight toward their drop zone. It had to be tonight. As they approached, the SEALs rose from their seats, checked their parachutes, and hooked up their oxygen tanks. The Hercules cargo doors opened and the SEALs dropped out one by one into the pitch-black night. Each SEAL faced a 20,000-foot drop into the darkness, all while being buffeted by winds that reached 40 knots. The operators each spent time in freefall, reaching speeds of up to 120 miles per hour before they snapped open their chutes and floated to land. By some miracle, the high winds had less of an impact than anticipated. The majority of SEAL Team 6 landed near enough to the intended drop zone to allow them to regroup. Those who didn't were dragged several hundred yards into the Somali desert, an inconvenience, but not one that would prevent them from regrouping with the rest of Blue Squadron. The 24 SEALs gathered, taking turns to put on their combat gear and wrap up their parachutes. A walk awaited. The Somali pirate camp was several miles away from the SEALs' location, meaning they'd have to walk for almost an hour in temperatures close to 100 degrees. Silently they moved, mostly using hand signals to communicate so they wouldn't give away their position. After a little over an hour of walking, Blue Squadron stood just 1,600 feet outside the pirate camp. The march had been intelligent. Each time the wind changed direction, the SEALs did the same, always marching with the wind in their faces to eliminate the possibility of scents and sounds being carried to the camp on the wind. Now they stood ready to carry out their assault. For most in Blue Squadron, what followed would be the most intense hour of their lives. Slowly, the SEALs closed in on the camp, led by an experienced operative named Justin Sheffield. He used hand signals to ensure every member of the team was in position once they were within hearing distance of the camp. Around half the team spread out to the left, with the other half moving to the right, creating a pincer formation that would allow Blue Squadron to quickly surround the pirates. At the same time, a couple of snipers took up positions on the outskirts of the camp, where they monitored the pirates' activities through thermal scopes. Once they were in position, the SEALs collectively raised their rifles, again led by Sheffield, to train their laser sights on their targets. This was not a giveaway. The infrared beams emitted by the laser sights were invisible to the naked eye, with the SEALs only able to see them because they were wearing night vision goggles. There was only one way this could end. Earlier in the night, Buchanan had found herself once again writhing in pain, silently pleading to God for help. Finally, she started to drift off to sleep on the weathered mat the pirates gave her to use as a bed when she heard a noise, a faint scratching sound off in the distance. She wasn't the only person in the camp to hear that noise. A pirate that she'd nicknamed Helper heard it too. "And then I see this look of just sheer terror on Helper's face," she would later tell CBS. "Then all of a sudden, it's just this eruption of gunfire." The sounds of AK-47s firing filled the air, with some of the Somali pirates shooting blindly into the murky black in the vain hope that they might hit something. Snipers took these pirates out in seconds, silencing their guns and making them a non-factor in the ensuing gunfight. As all of this was happening, the majority of Blue Squadron was rapidly advancing on Jessica's position, moving in formation while taking out any pirate that dared to stand in their way. As they closed the distance, the SEALs spotted Buchanan crouched on the floor, flanked by a pair of pirates who had their AK-47s pointed at her body. Along with another SEAL, Sheffield broke formation and closed in on the two pirates. In seconds, accurate shots from SEAL PKMs floored the hostage-takers, allowing Sheffield to run to Jessica so he could shield her from the rest of the firefight with his own body. More SEALs joined, forming a human shield around both Buchanan and Thisted. All Buchanan could say was, "Oh God," over and over. One thought crossed her mind in the chaos. "I cannot survive this." Buchanan thought the pirates were being attacked by another group, perhaps other pirates or the Al-Shabaab extremists to whom the pirates had been threatening to sell her just days before. She recalls the gunfire before feeling a firm pair of hands roughly grab her. Panicking, she pulls her blanket over her head, only to hear a man saying her name. Only the man didn't have a Somalian accent. He sounded American. "I can't compute," she later told CBS. "Like, I can't understand that somebody with an American accent knows my name." Pulling down the blanket, all she could see was black as she asked repeatedly, "You're American?" The SEAL who grabbed her picks her up and sprints, running for several minutes before putting her on the ground. It's only then that her rescuer identifies himself as a member of SEAL Team 6. He tells Buchanan that he knows that she's sick and that his team has food, water, and medicine. Then he tells her the words that she's been waiting to hear for 93 days. "We're here to take you home." With the pirates downed, the SEALs extracted Buchanan and Thisted, moving them toward a helicopter. So elated to have finally been rescued, Buchanan broke away from the SEALs, trying to assist her as soon as she saw the chopper, breaking out in a sprint that she somehow kept up, despite the pain shooting through her body. She says that she felt like she didn't start breathing again until she was in the helicopter and it had lifted from the ground. As for the brave SEALs who had rescued Buchanan, they were extracted via another chopper. Buchanan didn't see their faces or hear their names. They'd simply appeared in the dead of night, rescued her, and then disappeared. SEAL Team 6 left behind a destroyed Somali camp and 9 dead pirates. And they'd done it all just hours before President Obama was set to deliver his State of the Union address. As for Buchanan and Thisted, they were flown to the very Djibouti base that had played such a key role in planning the rescue mission. There she received the medical care she needed from US military doctors before being flown back home. Buchanan went on to make a full recovery from her life-threatening kidney infection. It was all in a day's work for SEAL Team 6. This incredible rescue mission showcases just how well-trained American Special Forces operatives are and how effective they can be when they're deployed. What do you think about Jessica Buchanan's story and the exploits of SEAL Team 6 during this rescue operation? Share your thoughts in the comments, and thank you, as always, for watching the video. Now go and check out how the F-35 Lightning devastated Houthi pirates, or click this other video instead.